again, everybody, for coming. And if this is your first time, please see me after and let me have your business card so we can add you to our mailing list and keep you abreast of everything that's going on. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff with Digital Sky and let him tell us what's going on in the skies.
Good morning. So let's talk about Digital Sky, because we have definitely evolved as a company over the last 4 years. The one thing that I like about Perk is it's very informal, and I'm a very informal guy. I have had coffee with the majority of the people in this room, and I leave that invitation open to everyone here. I've had a very weird life, and it is an hour-long story in itself. I think that I have a different story than most people because I came in the Digital Sky as a co-owner. I didn't start it, which is a different side. I actually had a very successful career for 10 years in the oil and gas industry as an advanced ultrasonic welding inspector. And I won't put you to sleep with that, but essentially what that comes down to is when a woman gets an ultrasound on her stomach when she's pregnant, you can introduce that same sound into steel at multiple angles and fire elements at different phases and then find out if there's cracking or things wrong with welds. It's a very high demand, very rare skill. So I traveled a lot. I averaged about 3,000 miles a week. I was in a different town every other day until about the last 3 years of my career where I started getting into the high pressure storage systems, which typically have a 30-mile kill radius. So if anybody knows where Geneva, Nebraska's at, we built a ammonia storage plant down there, and I was the head tech on that. If that were to cause a leak, crack, or break open, 30 miles is dead before they know it. So you have to have the best of the best on it. And it actually did work out because that thing actually did cave in on itself by accident, and it held what it was supposed to do in the pre-testing. So, pat on the back. So Digital Sky has been around for 4 years now. We've always been in Lincoln. We're on the west side of Lincoln over by Blue Blood Brewery is where our office is located. We originally started the company by Grant Schlickman. So right now there's 3 owners, myself, Grant, and Justin Kaiser. Now Grant and I have been friends. We went to the same school as Sarah and Fairbury. You just can't get away from Fairbury people. Grant went to Los Angeles to be a director. He went to film school out there. He had his own company and it didn't work out. So he moved back to Nebraska and became a creative director for Channel 8. During that time, he started to realize that no one was doing anything with drones, so he started Digital Sky as a part-time gig. Back then, and this is only 4 years ago, drones had such a wow factor, he never actually incorporated ground production as far as video or photography. It was all drones. At the same time, our other owner, Justin Kaiser, had graduated from both in business at UNL and flight school to be a pilot. He was starting his own drone stuff. They met and decided, why don't we join rather than compete? Now, the one thing I like to talk about with ups and downs at Perk is that has been their biggest battle before I came in. Ownership. I am the third owner of Digital Sky. They learned a lot of broken promises, a lot of crappy salesmen. They made a lot of big promises before they came in and basically drained Digital Sky almost dry. So it was kind of hard for me to come in because there was quite a wall up. But I've known Grant since I was a kid, and he was aware of my, I don't like to brag on myself, but successes. Why did I leave my previous career? I had noticed that in any job that I had, I always started at the bottom and worked to the top very quickly. So I thought, every time I peak out at a company, I'm stuck, and I would go somewhere else. So I thought, why don't I just own my own business again? When I was 15, I had a really weird injury, thanks to my father, who said, if you can't see the bone, we don't go to the doctor. By the time that we did, the doctor basically said, if you get hit wrong in football, you're going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. So I said, okay, we're not even that good. I'll just quit the team. And by accident, I started my own DJ company and owned that for about 10 years and then sold it to a company in Colorado. So I've always had the entrepreneur bug in my system. So when I came into Digital Sky, it was about a year ago. Digital Sky has since then morphed from just being drone-based to being a full video production and inspection company. So Digital Sky essentially has 2 divisions. The first is inspection, and I'll hand out some flyers at the end of this so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But inspection deals with anything from 3D modeling, 3D mapping. In the drone world, mapping is the equivalent to survey. But in the survey world, you have to have basically 5 years in that industry and an official stamp that says this is official survey. Most drone companies don't have it, so we work directly with the survey company. The benefit of mapping through drones is that it's about 1/3 of the cost and it is extremely quick turnaround. There are companies that their sole purpose, and I didn't know this until I got in Digital Sky, is to crush up concrete and sell it. That's how they make their money. Now, if you crush up an entire road, you have piles and piles for miles and miles, right? That is your inventory, that is your product. So you need to have an inventory count. Now, the old way to do that is get 1 to 2 guys, and it might take a couple days to come out and survey it. You could wait up to 4 weeks for results, or we can fly it with a fixed wing drone that looks just like an airplane in 30 minutes and have results to you by the next day. We can be accurate down to less than 1 inch, and if we have ground control points, which is a survey thing, we can be less than 3 centimeters in accuracy. We're extremely accurate as compared to Google Earth. Most people don't know that Google Earth just kind of smears colors. If they find the road and they say, okay, there's grass here, they're like, all right, we'll just color it right to the road and call it good, because it's typically good enough for the public. We do all types of inspections that we didn't even know were around. Bridge inspections for the state, we were the testing platform for that. The old way is to get a bucket truck and reach around up underneath a bridge with 2 guys in it, and then you have to drive it. It's very dangerous and it's not fun. The other form of inspection is smokestacks. I have done this and it is not fun. Smokestacks can be anywhere from 100 to 200 feet in the air. They're so hot, they crack all the time. The old way is you get in a basket and a guy in a crane lifts you up to the top, and you have to inspect it with the wind. Because you are so high, the wind tells you what you do. So basically you inspect, and then you blow away, you just kind of hang out, and then you inspect, and you blow away. It's a very weird process. And I've seen a lot of people walk off the job after one time. We do all kinds of things. One thing that we ran into recently that we weren't aware of was brick and mortar inspection. There's an architecture firm in Lincoln that we've been working with directly, that their niche in the market is old courthouses, renovating them and seeing if they need to be fixed. The old school way to find out if there's a problem is you have to scale and crawl the building and drive around it with a man lift. In most courthouses, a man lift's pretty easy, but it's so time consuming and expensive. Now what we do with them is we set up a monitor system. We use our 2-pilot drone, which involves 1 person flying. The other person uses the camera. It's got 2 cameras. So you're not really worried about crashing into anything. So then the architects can look at the monitor and say, okay, take a picture of that. Can you zoom in on that? Now they have a full-blown report. And then afterwards, I didn't realize it was such a problem afterwards with brick companies. You think like, oh, they did it, right? It's done. Not so much. We found a lot of problems. So at the end, we go back and we reevaluate. Did they do what they said they did? So now they have a before and after report. We also do power line inspections. So last year we flew 260 miles for LES, and essentially what they're looking at is the right-of-way. You'll see it written as ROW a lot. Right-of-way inspections are big because they don't want people building underneath their power lines. So let's say that next year they see a barn built underneath their power lines. They go out there and say, hey, this needs to be removed, it's on our right-of-way, and they say, no, this barn was here when I got the land. Well, they recorded it last year with us, now they have legal proof, it's a done deal. Whereas before, it was all visual, so all 260 miles had to be walked or driven by a person. We had a drone that we had to do emergency landing last year when we were flying them because the wind went from like 5 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour and just killed our battery, so we just took it down in the field. We had to walk like 3/4 of a mile through a cornfield, and you would think like, oh, there it is, I can see it. No, by the time we got to it, I'm like, I understand now why they're having us fly these, because if I had to do 260 miles of this, I'd be looking for a different job. The other side, which is by far our biggest moneymaker, is creative, which is company branding, digital marketing, mostly through the form of video production, both ground to air. So like I said, we started 4 years ago as just drone-based, and since then we've morphed into ground-to-air video production. Video marketing is taking off faster and more than it's ever done. 18 and 19 will be the biggest years for it by far. We do video production for everyone from like smaller companies like Fields Floral to large corporations like Endicott Clay, which is a worldwide brick manufacturer, NMC, which is your Caterpillar dealer in Nebraska. Everyone has essentially realized that TV and radio for some industries is bullcrap. Because if they say, hey, on our TV station, we have 200,000 viewers, they're going to see your ad. Can you prove it? No, you cannot. Can you prove that clicks, data through social media that it was seen? Yes. Our website, we code and build from the ground up. We track every single click and we adjust accordingly because that's what you have to do in this day and age to keep up. We also do logo design, any kind of marketing really. Photography is a big one. The number one question we get asked all the time is, so you guys basically just do real estate, right? We really don't do real estate as heavy as people would think. We do a lot of commercial real estate and a lot of $1 million plus homes. This year we've introduced a pricing plan that I think, after talking to what felt like thousands of agents last year, will incorporate the ability for a first-year residential real estate agent and a 20-year agent to have a pricing plan that fits their schedule and their needs and whatever, not bankrupt them just on advertising. The most common question we also get is, I have a drone. Why can't I just do it myself? Well, there's a lot of things. The most common are, number one, do you have a certification? Drones are regulated by the FAA. You have to be certified with 107 cert, which is not too hard to get, but the test is not fun. The test itself is hard, but getting it isn't. You also need to be insured. What happens if your buddy's kid that has a drone wrecks it into the house that you're trying to sell? Does this insurance cover that? The FAA also fines people for flying incorrectly or illegally in airspaces. That is an $11,000 fine back to the client. So let's say you're a real estate agent and you say, oh, I'm going to give this kid $50 to fly this house for me. The FAA and us can actually pull the serial numbers from your drones through the metadata of the video, and your drone is registered so we can tell you flew it. So can they. That's why you'll see videos on YouTube like, oh, the FAA sent me a letter, the FAA called me. That's what they're talking about. The fine goes back to the agent, so the real estate agent per video would be fined $11,000. The kid flying would probably get a fine, but it's probably not going to be more than $1,000. Unfortunately, this is always a catch-22 for me when I present, because the biggest thing that separates us from everybody is our ability to edit video. If you're a good editor, you can have crap for footage and make it look like gold. But when I say that, I'm basically saying we're not good at capturing film. We're just good at editing. But we're good at both, because we shoot for the edit is the big thing. One of the biggest projects we took on last year in the real estate world was we had 3D models were given to us, and they wanted us to film an empty lot and then put the 3D model in. When you film for a 3D model, the model has to be able to move as if the building was still. We were given a lot of footage that they tried to deal with from somebody else, where the building kind of like moved on its own because they didn't understand how to shoot for the edit. It's not just the editing, it's also the filming. Where do I see Digital Sky going in the next couple years? Video production is going to take off tremendously, and we're ready for that. We're ahead of that, and most companies are ahead of their competition in that area. Inspection is slow growth, because inspection, what I always say is we're essentially introducing CDs to people who've always used cassette tapes. Once they get the CD, they're like, throw those tapes away, right? But to get them to transfer over to that is the hard part. Especially most architecture firms are ran by people who have been in the industry for 25, 30 plus years, and they don't want to adapt to new technology. That's pretty common in any industry, I understand that. My biggest thing for us, I guess I should have said this earlier, Grant leads the creative side, Justin leads the inspection side. I am basically the middleman, the business development, whatever you want to call me, president, operations manager. I can do both, and I like being an in-person guy, so I kind of do everything, as well as our accounting. I'm a big numbers guy, I'm a big debt payoff guy, so I really, really enjoy numbers. I'm also big in, why can't we do it ourselves? Like, we're very big into having a good branding image as far as clothing and logos and things like that go. Why can't I do that myself? So we're probably going to be getting into that. Anything that we do, I'm constantly asking, why can't we just buy a company or do that ourselves? When I was younger, I grew up with a dad whose motto still at 57 is, if I didn't have to sleep at night, I could get a third job. So that's all I knew was to work. I wasn't good at sports, but I was very, very good at working. So I guess the thing that makes us stick apart from the competition, whoever it may be, is that when we do work for you, I don't look at it as this is my client. I look at that as this is my team. I'm constantly calling clients and telling them, did you see what your competition is doing? Did you see the videos that they put out? Let's go after that. Let's take them down, because to me, work is a sport. That's all that I've known. My brother's a banker, and he constantly tells me, I don't understand why you put so much money in your retirement. You're never going to retire. You're going to be like Dad and work until you die. And unfortunately, he is right. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your schedule. Time to me is more valuable than money. No one in my family has ever lived past 66. I'm 31, so essentially to me, my life is halfway over. So that's why I work hard every day, because I feel like every day I get up, I just see sand in the hourglass ticking away. I don't take anything for granted, and I push our company and my employees to the limit as hard as I can. And that's something I can get into. Again, I leave the invitation open to everyone. I would love to have a one-on-one coffee with you, and I'll hand out some flyers, take some questions. I appreciate you coming. Yes, sir.
As a person who's 66 years of age,
Are you worried?
not at all. You seem to be in all sorts of crazy things. Why would you be in logos on shirts and looking at smokestacks?
That's a great question. I guess, let me answer it in a couple ways. The first one, the question I always get is, how'd you go from that industry to this industry? When you work on the road, you basically only get one day off, Sunday, and you typically spend that in a motel. So you get very bored, and you make a pretty good amount of money, so you have money to spend and find a hobby. Now, I grew up running soundboards as a child because my dad was an audio nerd. He did rebuild stuff all the time. So I started doing audio, like repairing audio for people through freelancing. And then I started doing video, and I just kept getting referred and referred. And I realized I'm pretty good at this. And I thought, maybe I could stop traveling and get off the road and start my own company. And when I was getting ready to start my own business, I was actually asking Grant, what kind of drone do you think I should buy? And then I realized we should just join instead of compete in the same town. As far as being with a smokestack to a logo, to me, it's the two things. It's, can we do it ourselves? And not necessarily just us. Maybe we have other people work with us to do it. And then also, is there a demand? Because there is a large demand for drone inspection. And I'm a huge guy on safety. I saw a lot of people die when I worked in the oil and gas industry, and I've had near-death experiences twice. So safety for me is number one. They'll typically tell you it's number one in their world, but they're full of crap. It's usually profit, then safety. But besides the point. Any other questions?
Yes, two. First one is it just the three of you that you have employees?
So right now there are 3 owners, myself, Grant, Justin. We've got a full-time employee on the creative side who graduated from film school in New York. Then we also have a couple salesmen, but they don't work full-time for us. It's a testing ground that I'm running where I'm trying to figure out how do we remove the constant. Most people want a salesman, but they can't afford that payroll. So what if I pay an extremely high commission for someone who I don't have on my payroll full time? So I'll see. I'm not sure where it's going because it's in the testing grounds, but for now, a couple salesmen, 1 full-time employee, and 3 owners.
Okay. And does your ultrasonics work on composites as well as metals?
I did some composites in the aircraft industry, but it does, but it's very confusing, especially if you have a composite over steel, because then you have 2 different velocities.
Does it find microcracks around holes?
Yes.
It will?
Yep. Especially on an edge, you should be able to catch a corner trap, no problem.
Okay, very good.
Darren?
From a business development point, what is your, having made that your goal for the year here, what's been your biggest challenge with that starting off?
Biggest challenge is knowing where every dollar goes. When I came in the Digital Sky, I had asked them, it looked like our accounts were insane. It looked like they were spending money left and right. And when I looked at our accounts, it looked like we had the ability to. And like I said, I'm a big numbers guy, so I said, why don't I do our books? And when I started to look at it, it was so far off from one of their previous owners who had a degree in accounting. We had an account that said it had $115,000 in it. When I went back years, it had $15,000 in it. So when you're spending like you have 100K and you only have 15, you drain your company pretty quick. They were operating out of one account. We now operate out of 7 accounts, and then in QuickBooks, we actually operate out of about 45 accounts. And that's kind of a confusing situation. It makes sense if you can see it on paper, but it's more for planning for years ahead. But know where every dollar goes is my biggest advice to anyone. Any other questions?
Yeah, go back. Sorry. Give me your thoughts on the current debate in the Nebraska legislature. I'm sure you've never been asked this yet.
Nope.
On the drone regulations that some senators want to enforce.
So my biggest thing on that is the public needs to be protected. If you are out in the public and I film you, that's my right. Can I fly over you? No, I cannot legally fly over you. But can I fly up to your house? Sure. Is it right? No. So I think that there needs to be stricter laws on a kid getting a drone as opposed to the people that are trying to do it for a living. Because as soon as I say that I do drone work, like I had a lady the other night freak out on me and said, "You're always invading my privacy," and just went off. And I'm like, okay, first off, I don't care if you're sunbathing, and even if I did, I can fly so good you wouldn't even know I was there, right? The kids are what I'm worried about because they don't care. They're not grown up enough to understand, leave that property alone. You know, when I see people flying in the Haymarket, which is super illegal, there's no regulation on it unless the FAA catches them, and they're so backed up, you could probably get away with it. Plus, they're also stealing business from me because they went and bought a drone, and they just decided, well, we got a drone, we'll just fly it instead of hire somebody. So the FAA is making very big steps in limiting that and regulating it, but I definitely want the public to be safer and protected from non-commercial flights. Yes?
You were talking earlier about you can look at somebody's video and look at the metadata and see who it is. Well, what if somebody goes to Menards and buys
The little drones?
$100 drone and flies it? Is there metadata included?
There is, but the ability to pull it would be basically impossible because it has to be registered. Because once you find the numbers, now you can look at the directory and find it. So if a kid went and bought a little one, you probably would never be able to find it. The one thing is that the battery life is so short on those drones. So it's got to come down sometime. So if you can watch it, the question we always get asked, what if the battery dies? They all come back to where they took off. So unless it's a super cheapo one, it's probably just going to die, but most of them have to come back so they don't fall on someone's head. The one thing that people forget is what they'll do is they'll go out in like a lake or the ocean and they'll film their boat and then they'll drive away and the thing will start to die and it doesn't care what you think when it's dying and it'll just go straight in the water because it doesn't understand there's no ground there. And just to answer a little bit off that question, we always get told, well, we have a drone. We have a drone. Why would we hire you? Drones are like cell phones. As soon as you get it, it's worthless. The resale value on them is basically none. That's our biggest problem when we invest in drones. Drones to me are basically a transport tool. It's the camera that I'm worried about. You can update the camera on drones and not worry about updating the body of the drone because the physics of flight really won't change, right? It's how we fly is what changes. So yes, you got a drone, but now your company is looking at it a year later and you're going, well, this thing's a hunk of junk and our competition is beating us because their quality looks better. It's because they get someone that does it for a living. Any other questions?
So how do you answer that question? What do you tell them?
I would tell them it depends on what they want to invest in. Because if you're going to drop, our inspection drone, which I know that's a whole different world from creative, but our inspection drone is $30,000. Then you tag the software on top of that, that's another 10 to 20 grand. plus insurance. You know, that's the biggest thing. Are you covered by insurance as well? But on the creative side, I would say, you know, it's what do you want to get out of it? I have multiple meetings with people that I'll flat out tell them, this isn't for you. I can't really help you because this is what you want and this is what you don't want. I'm a very open person. I'm not in it to sell it. Most of the time when I give a sales pitch, I'm more, let's create ideas and see where we can go from there. I'm not there to pitch you this one product because I want to, every company says they want to innovate. I want to innovate, but I want to change things. I want people to look at our company and go, how the hell are they doing that? Why aren't we doing that? That's what I want to look at. And when the client's doing it, that makes my day because we help them get to that point. I think that's probably it.
We give you a mug for coming, and we really appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys for coming. Hang around as long as you like. Exchange business cards and do a little bit of business while you're here. And we hope to see you next week. Okay?
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.